All right. Welcome, everyone, to Visionary Leadership Call for Friday, August 29th, 2025. We're taking it from a little different angle today. Today, we're talking about Brave Mystic Training, which is a project that Shweta and I have developed together over the past almost 1 year. There was close to 9 months of visioning that led to the birth of cohort number 1 of this year. And now we are approaching the beginning of cohort number 2. So, this space, visionary leadership, is a space where we talk about what it means to be a leader in our life. Now, this is across containers. This can be whether you are a leader of a solo business project, as an entrepreneur or solo entrepreneur, solopreneur. It can be leader of a family. Maybe you have kids, or maybe you have grandkids, or just it's this idea of how am I showing up and how am I being a leader in my own life. And we've explored this across a variety of lenses, but today I want to talk about this concept of brave mystic training, which has been inspired by a lot of the work that I've been doing in the realm of visionary leadership in my own life. And when we put, when cohort 1 was winding down and we were going into this little bit of an interim recharge, reset, recalibrate space to prepare to launch cohort 2 at the School of Imagination, I took the opportunity to start hosting these visionary leadership calls just as a service for the community to build the conversation, to focus on aspects of what it means to be a leader that really only mystics talk about. Okay, so, drawing on everything that we do here at the School of Imagination, which is heavily rooted in the work of Neville Goddard, who taught that imagination creates reality, that consciousness is the only reality. It's framed upon that. It's like, okay, when we begin to mature in this wisdom, how do we become leaders in vision? That's the basic idea. How do we become leaders in vision? So today we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to bring Shweta up. We're going to have a little conversation about Brave Mystic Training and the vision behind Brave Mystic Training, and then also how it, as a resource, prepares mystics to become authors of their experience in a way that also enables them to be visionary leaders. All right, so Shweta, if you would like to join me.
Hello.
Hi,
Mic check.
Shweta.
All hear me? Yeah.
Sounds good to
Okay.
me, yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so Shweta, first of all, thank you for hopping on here. I know you have your Dream Logic Hour coming up shortly. But I wanted to have this opportunity, since we are co-creators of the Brave Mystic Training Experience, I thought this would be a unique opportunity for our community to hear from us directly, like a little bit behind the scenes and some of our thought processes about what has gone into building this as a project, as an output of the visionary leadership frame of mind. So let me go ahead and frame what Brave Mystic Training is for those of you that maybe are just hearing me talk about it for the first time. Brave Mystic Training is a 99-day authorship and simulation mastery training that has been creating some remarkable transformations. And it's immersive. It is structured like a boot camp. And when you join Brave Mystic Training, really what you're signing up for is a structure for a season of focus. The 99 days is a full season. Like if you think about the 4 seasons of the year, 99 days ends up being a full season. And within the 99 days, there's 3 33-day cycles of focus. Okay, so it's 3 by 33 for a total of 99. And for 99 days, every day, there is a prompt that when you sign up for Brave Mystic Training, this prompt, when you come into the program, every single day, you're taking a step down the path of honing in your practice of authorship. Now, I bring the authorship training angle. That's my lane. And my job as the authorship contributor here is twofold. One, it's helping to shape the prompts. You and I obviously shape these daily prompts together, but I bring the authorship side of the daily prompts. And then there's 2 classes a week, and the first class on Tuesday is authorship. So I'm leading 14 deep dive sessions where together as a group, we are exploring the deeper concepts of authorship. And the key idea of authorship is to train mystics to step into their true authority as the writer of their life. Now, it's very easy to take concepts like authorship and keep them conceptual and intellectual. And that's why we created this 99-day season of focus, because there's a difference between just thinking about things and actually practicing, actually living them out. You can sit on your couch and you can imagine what it would be like to, let's say act in a movie or a TV show. And you can, just play around with it in your imagination. But it's a step further to then get up and go and walk into, let's say, an indie movie production where, there's lights and their camera and action, and like actively practice it, right? Or to get on stage and actually practice, spontaneous comedy, right? It's like you have to get out of the, let me just sit and think about this or dream about it, and actually begin to act it out in your life and take action. And that's what this prompt, this structure prompt is designed to do. It's to take it beyond just the thinking realm and make it actionable in a way where when you emerge out of this 99-day season of focus, you're walking in body as the author. So with that being a little bit of a background on the program and on the authorship side, Shweta, I'm curious, how do you see your simulation mastery lane working alongside with what I bring with authorship?
Great question, and excellent background for why it is that we wanted to put something together here and work together, because in my lane is simulation mastery, and kind of on its face, you have the authorship portion. It might not be obvious what the simulation mastery lane kind of adds to the picture. And what is that even about? I wanted to kind of walk you through how we work with consciousness through the simulation mastery program. So first I'll start by saying that while we're absolute consciousness, we're infinite absolute consciousness, and our source is this utterly ineffable, infinite version of ourselves. But our reality has structure. And Neville pointed to this structure in many different ways. He called it the wheel of recurrence. And these are patterns that repeat in life, in various areas of life, that repeat until we decide to spiral outwards. So he would say that each of us have descended on to this plane. We've descended on in this shared reality, and we've done so in order to leave the wheel of recurrence through discovering who we truly are and spiral higher. And I started to realize, as someone that was practicing Neville's teachings as I understood them in his books, but also as translated by so many hundreds of people online, that it made sense that reality had more of a structure and more patterns than what originally met the eye. I noticed that there were things that were holding me back in some areas, things that felt like a heavy, heavy blanket, and some areas were unmovable, whereas other areas were easily able to shift. My states were easily able to shift. And then I kind of came across in my study, in consciousness study, of this idea of systems thinking. And systems thinking is sort of a separate way of looking at the world where you essentially you're looking at the world through patterns and input output loops. You're looking at the world as a process almost. And it started to give me language of like, oh, that's what's going on in my conscious creation process. There's systems thinking principles that are coming into play. And as my awareness of that built, I tell everyone that Neville's work is my cornerstone work, and it is true. Every day, almost every day, and at least every week, I dive deep into his lectures, try to find rare lectures, go back to some of my favorite passages of his. I love his work. And so as I became aware that, hey, there's some systems thinking principles that seem to apply here, I saw that he spoke to them. I saw that he was speaking to them in his lectures and his books, just using either biblical frameworks or metaphor, like various stories. So I could see that the parallels were deep. And what was really interesting is kind of sitting around here in 2024, 2025, now we had a lot more language, things like inertia, momentum, the path of least resistance, things like the input output feedback loop that gets strengthened. We have more of a language now that, things like simulation theory, systems thinking, even AI programming logic. So there's so much to kind of sort of strengthen this idea that our consciousness works in patterns, and those patterns are similar to how a simulation works. And so I won't get too deep in here, but to kind of bring it back to the Neville stuff, Neville said that our consciousness is actually keyed low so we can share this dream. So you can think of us as the infinite that's sort of filtering through our patterns and structure on this wheel of recurrence. And with simulation thinking and systems thinking and simulation mastery, I started being able to spot inertia in areas where I was stuck. And I was like, okay, there's momentum here. And that's why it feels hard to move this along. I was able to apply systems thinking principles in these areas to have way more clarity about what was going on. Because previously, what would I tell myself? Oh, I must have some kind of block. Or I would say, I just need to live in the end even harder. But all the while, I could feel a structure that I was pushing up against when there was a block there. So what it did was it became a simulation mastery portion was born from a problem I was trying to solve, clarity I was trying to get, and sort of solve for some of the oversimplification that can happen when we essentially become Neville students that are on the internet. We're Neville students that see other people on TikTok, on YouTube, simplifying those concepts, and that's well and good because you have to start somewhere and you have to be able to process it. And when you get into an intermediate stage and you've practiced this in different areas, it's likely that we'll need a little bit more of a structured understandings of the patterns in reality. And the cool thing is we're in a place now where there's a ton of studies and a ton of like areas of expertise that can help us do that. The other thing I kind of wanted to bring to the table here is this idea of authorship is really about activating your storyline. And we're all in a story. We're all in a storyline right now. And so much of, when we go into the role of like director, actor, author, these higher level roles, what's really happening is we're taking control of like the beginning, middle, and end of the story by living in the end. Because we're the main character inside our simulation. We're like the main character inside like a game, a system almost. So I think of simulation mastery as a program, sort of like within Brave Mystic training to help people learn some of the mechanics so that you move from the character to more of like the operator or like the operant power, if you will. Because that's the other thing. A lot of Neville's language spoke to this idea that we are operating something. So this idea of operant power is speaking to this idea that there's a version of you that's actually running the show. There's a version of you that's actually controlling it, and that's what I wanted to, because most people in this space, we fall back into becoming reactive pretty easily, where we realize maybe intellectually we realize that things aren't happening to us, they're happening through our state. But it can be challenging to remember that, where the concepts in simulation mastery help people understand the underlying patterns so that we can kind of work with them, better understand them, diagnose them instead of against them.
That makes a lot of sense to me, Shweta. And I'm flashing back as I'm listening to you. I'm flashing back to some of our early stage conversations about a year ago. It was the last quarter of 2024 when you brought this to me and you said, hey, I've been doing this deep dive research and I'm starting to realize that there's logic and there is a code behind how reality operates. And you were saying things to me like, I think Neville was trying to say this using the best language that he had at the time, living pre-computers, or at least pre-computers as we understand them now. Neville was trying to say, based on his own personal experience and the mission that he was on to help awaken humanity, he was trying to say, that reality is a simulation and that there's a logic, to how it works. And so you're coming to me and you're sharing these things with me, and it just, listening to this systems thinking frame applied to everyday life and waking reality really began to move me, meaning that you and I would talk about something on one of our weeklies, and we were talking for 2 hours a week in a call, and then like later that week something would happen and it would like be haunting to that conversation that we had, and I started to see what you were talking about. And so I think what really started to stand out to me is like, look, there's so many people that are just kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall with these concepts. And, it's like, oh, well, for some people, affirmations work. And for other people, mantras work. And for other people, state akin to sleep works. And for other people, well, they just imagine on the fly and release attachment. And then that works. And, other people, it doesn't seem to work at all. And, they say the whole thing is BS. It's like all of this very diverse experience. And it's like, okay, in my own personal journeys that I've had in and out of body and, through my consciousness and my awareness, I understand the universe to be an extremely ordered place. So in my mind, there has to be some sort of framework that is really the reason why all of these people are having the experiences that they're having. There has to be some sort of answer. It's like that quandary puzzle, of like why people's experiences are the way they are, why my experience is the way it is. And when you brought these systems thinking frames, I started to realize that it was a way to diagnose and to get clarity. It's not that there's a one size fits all answer that I can just, get on YouTube and tell the world, hey, this is what you need to know. But there is a way of thinking that we can teach that now empowers people. And of course, sovereignty is one of the primary values of the School of Imagination and visionary leadership in general, right? It's like instead of being like, oh, I have the answer for you, let's convene a group of people and teach them to see the logic, the structure, the code in their own NIOS
Yeah.
and empower them in that way.
Yes, and I think I have to share sort of an example of how this came to me. I was studying a system that's really popular right now and is such an important, important life-changing system, and that's AI. And I was studying how does AI work, just sort of like as someone that wanted to understand it from the periphery. And I'm starting to learn about how ChatGPT works, and it sort of struck me that AI is essentially it's essentially a system that you put an input in based on the training and the algorithms, an output comes out. It actually can create an infinite type of responses for you. There's an infinite variety of responses it can create from you, but those outputs that are infinite within parameters, and those parameters are based on the purpose of it. So it's an infinite intelligence within parameters that creates outputs from inputs based on its training, and it's always evolving. It's like, okay, that's really, I'm here, I am understanding systems thinking lens. Like, AI is a system that might be similar to us in a way. I mean, if we're keyed low compared to absolute consciousness, then AI is way more keyed low compared to a human being. I started to learn about how AI systems work, that AI was actually built off of natural intelligence, like how natural intelligence works, the best of natural intelligence. Those sort of those frameworks were included in how AI works. So as I was starting to do that, a concept came to me, and it was called overfitting within AI. And when I started learning about what overfitting was, essentially what happens in overfitting in AI is that it's essentially when the AI starts over training and learning, only tagging certain things as success. So essentially, it's like a model that learns patterns too specifically to a specific data. And that, I was like, what's the problem with overfitting? Why am I interested in this? It started making me realize when I looked into how overfitting was described in AI that that's exactly what's happening to so many people in the Neville Goddard community. And that is this: we have one desire and we get overtrained or over patterned or over focused on these what we call the success of that desire, maybe a specific person. We over focus on one area. So what happens to the AI when it does that? Well, it can't create fantastic outputs. It's not healthy for that AI. It's not able to transfer, learn, or create anything new. The AI cannot create ideal outputs in many different areas, and including the area that it's overfitting on. If it overfits to that area, let me know if that's clear in the audience. I'd like it's kind of a complicated seeming concept, but that's what's happening with us. With when we overfit and obsess over one area of life, one desire, and we only say, oh, that's a success when it comes out a specific type of way, that's us overfitting. So that was one of my first forays into realizing that some of these systems thinking concepts were exactly what was going on for me when I was creating my outputs in my reality. I was shocked. Overfitting was a huge one and completely changed the way that I live my life now. I used the antidote to overfitting, which is to spread, get more generalized with the things I want in my life and get more broad and get to the feeling place. So I use overfitting as a diagnosis for myself. There's also firewalls. I started learning what firewalls are. So that's not only in AI, although it's used in AI, of course, but in software development. A firewall is essentially a set of rules that stop information from getting through. As soon as this particular system senses that something bad is coming its way, or something that it tags as dangerous in any way, that firewall goes up and blocks that information from coming through. I started realizing that applies to various areas of my life and various areas of other manifestors that I'd seen, where in that area, if they had a fear about something or if they had a past trauma about something, nope, nothing is coming that way. So that's why they would get no movement at all in that area. It wasn't like there was just no change at all for years and years and years. So I guess what I'm speaking to here is I was starting to use systems thinking principles, both general systems thinking and specific to like how AI works, diagnose myself and completely shift like my state and my reality. So, and this was hours and hours, as you mentioned, of us talking about this and hashing it out and trying to distill it, because it blew my mind at the time, and there was just so much that I had started to uncover.
Thank you for illuminating that a little bit further, and also sharing a couple of the terms that we are adapting from software or from AI, because they when applied as an interface to waking reality, they really do have a strong intersection. And if you can, a lot of times metaphors is how we understand things, so we have like these AI or systems thinking or software metaphors, and then if we can understand how it works in this smaller area, such as in software, then that helps us understand how the same concept is happening to us in our waking reality. I know that having the terms has unlocked so much for me, And I see in the chat also Ariel saying the same thing, overfitting showing up in so many sneaky ways. And it's helpful to have the term as a pulse check to support stepping back into more expansive authorship. So I want to step back for a moment and just explore how authorship and simulation mastery fit together and why we chose to put this into a single program. So authorship is kind of the right-brained, and I don't really believe in a right and left brain, but I use that as a term that a lot of people have heard used, right? It's kind of the artistic right side of the right side brain, the kind of who am I being? Who do I want to be in my life? What is my root identity? What is my soul signal that I'm here to give life to? It's identity work. The more that we distill what Neville teaches to its core essence, the more we recognize that he was talking about identity more than anything else. He was talking about, writing your identity, which is another way of also saying, choosing your state, but really choosing to be the identity of the person who is in that state of being that is your ideal self. He didn't use the word authorship. In fact, I think he rarely even used the word identity, but that's part of how this work evolves over time. It's like the teachers before him didn't say it in the same way that he was saying it. And so now, we're the generation carrying forward this wisdom. And so, we will further clarify the terms, and I'm sure the generation that comes after us will further clarify even more. So where we are now, it's like, all right, I understand that to live my best life, which, here at the School of Imagination, we believe the whole point of a spiritual practice is to improve quality of life. It's not to escape it. It's not to float off into, depersonalization or disidentification. It's like, no, I'm here and I have a human body for a reason, and I'm here to live my best life. And that means living a full life, an abundant life. That means having all of the things that are the true desires of my heart. And so if I'm going to do that, then the best way to do that is to learn to author my identity. And so if authorship is the practice of choosing your identity and then being, having strong endurance in that identity because of the skills of authorship, which include nervous system sovereignty and all these other, practices that we discuss and teach to make it super practical and applicable to everyday life. If that's what authorship is, then simulation mastery is the physics of the book. Right? So your life, you're the author, you're writing yourself as a character in your book. What is the physics of this earth plane? What is the physics of this reality? Waking and sleeping. Obviously, we talk about dream logic, coming up next. There's physics of the dream world as well, but there are physics of physical waking reality. There is a logic that governs how intelligence responds to our authorship. And if I just come and I only speak about authorship, I'm really only offering one half of the puzzle, because you can author, but if you don't understand the physics of the stage or the physics of the book, the world stage or the book, then you're missing the other key link or the other key aspect. So that's why we combined these two into a program, a season of focus. So it's yes, I'm learning to author my identity boldly with the pen in my hand. And I'm learning state resilience through these nervous system sovereignty practices and more. And then on the simulation mastery side, I'm also learning about the intelligence of reality itself, which we could say is the intelligence of the field. And brave mystics will tell you, we are the field. The field's not outside of us. The field is simply another aspect of the being that we truly are in our multiple forms of manifestation. Right? So it's like, let's understand the physics of that larger aspect of our being. And I see that as being what simulation mastery brings. And of course, there's all these terms that help us decode it. But Shweta, I want to kind of take a slight detour here. And
Mhm.
I remember when you first started teaching Simulation Mastery in cohort one, uh, one or two brave mystics came and pulled you aside and said, I feel like you're just offering us another metaphor. Like, do we really need this complex language for something that is so simple? And I invite you to respond to that and then also respond about how their perspective shifted as they got deeper into the program.
Yes, I get. Well, first I'll say that depending on where we are in our journey, simplicity can serve, and then complexity can serve too. There's been times where I needed to build out what was going on and really see all the puzzle pieces for what they are. And there's times when I needed a simple practice and just a break from something. However, if we're taking this on for the rest of our lives, the 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 reason there's bravery needed in the first place is that life is this adventure of, even though it's cyclical and there's wheel of recurrence, it's like an adventure of surprises. There's Neville would call it the I think he said affliction, like circle of affliction, or the burning
Furnaces.
affliction, the furnaces of affliction, exactly. And so I see that when simplicity is done and you need to know more of the why, that ache is there. That ache was there for me, and it's there for many others. And I see that ache honestly online. I see that in spaces where people are wondering, why would it happen? Why am I successful in this area and not another? What can I do now that I've exhausted everything? I was told I just needed to robotically affirm because my affirmations create and my thoughts create. So at that point, you can see sort of the negativity over oversimplification. Someone tells you you create your reality, and if you want that person, just visualize being with that person, and people have lost years. So I would say while simplification has its place, and simplicity absolutely has its place, sometimes you need to be willing to go into the complexity of something and kind of sit with it for a bit, map it out, make sense of the terrain that you're in consciousness, and figure out what to do. And I can tell you from experience that it made me realize, like, when I zoomed out of a specific desire, or when I zoomed out of something that I was hyper focusing on because it was simple, like a robotic affirmation, I just zoomed out. I'm like, I don't feel so good right now. What exactly is bothering me? I had to do that inner work where I had to go within and realize that there was a ton of a momentum in a couple of storylines, in a couple of loops, as we call it in Brave Mystic training, zero momentum, so complete inertia in other areas of my life. And so starting to map that out using the diagnostic process, in that we teach in Brave Mystic training, starting to map that out gave me a way, while it added a little more complexity in that there was more variables there, but it gave me a way more useful map of what I needed to do. I was able to zoom out of my hyper obsession of one desire, get to a healthy place where I was able to create an abundance in many different areas, regain my confidence, and step into authorship in a holistic and strengthened way. And that original problem that I was crying over before I started this journey of applying systems thinking, it's like such a far away concept now. And I think that's what's been astonishing about this, is like recognizing that there is simplicity. And this, most of Neville's teachings, you could probably distill it into a couple of stories, or a couple of pages, honestly, like in terms of the principles. But he had a 30-year career, and he used all of the stories in the Bible in such a unique way, and he had so many different ways of speaking about this simple teaching, because that complexity adds color and adds structure, and then you can kind of move forward with knowing what I like to call like the terrain of your consciousness.
I love that. I'm remembering towards the end of cohort one, when you took one of your Thursday sessions, and the entire class, you were sharing success stories applying what you had learned from the simulation mastery lens. And like, that was one of my favorite classes. I mean, I loved the arc that you gave in general. It was very illuminating, but there's something about sharing the success stories and like seeing them as applied in everyday life that
Mm-hmm.
it was very moving. In general, I really thought the Thursday sessions from cohort one uh, painted in like a sequential arc of development to help people start wherever they are and then accelerate in their understanding and begin to apply what they're learning so that by the time they're graduating at the end of 99 days, they really get it. They're able to speak intelligently using simulation mastery terms. So my question for you, Shweta, is what is what is the rhythm that is guiding you as you guide these mystics through simulation mastery?
It's funny you ask that. Well, let me put it this way. I asked myself this question. I said, okay, let's say that I inherited a system, and so like let's say it's like an AI system. Let's say I inherited an AI system that can create infinite. We know it can create infinite kinds of outputs. We know that it can do that, but right now it's not creating ideal outputs. It's creating outputs that could be improved, some of that are not ideal, that are not even though we know it could be infinite. So if I inherited a system, if I was an AI programmer and I inherited a system that I know could be infinite but right now isn't, where would I start in the back end? How would I start diagnosing it? How would I what would I start need to start to know about how the system was trained, what the weightings are in this specific AI system, what firewalls are up, what loops already have momentum, and what do we need to rewrite. I kind of put that hat on, and using what I learned in my sort of deep study of systems thinking, I started to apply it to myself. And so that whole process is what I try to bring into the program. First couple of classes, I just want to say what systems thinking really is, and I've come a long way since the first cohort, in hoping in starting to realize, oh, these are the questions people are going to have, so I should frame it in this way or try to simplify this a little bit more. But essentially, the first couple of classes, we talk about what systems thinking even is and why it's useful for us if we think of ourselves as keyed low consciousness as Neville students. And then we map out what the terms mean. Then we apply a specific process that I use the GPT for, but we you can use other LLMs as well. But I like we practiced with GPT to do a little bit of self diagnostics using these systems thinking terms. And the diagnostic itself is so useful because you get to see, okay, here I was thinking I was living in the end, but what's really happening is there's a firewall, there's a ton of inertia in this area. Like you have a bit more, you have a diagnostic that takes into account all so much of the structure of your thoughts and so much of the structure of what's happening within. Once you have that diagnostic, then you can apply different tools, you can apply different ways of thinking, so that you can work with that system. So, for example, I started realizing that there was so much momentum that I was leaking outwards in my desire in the social and like relationship arena. So here I was thinking I had all these like desires, but I was putting so much momentum and so much emphasis, and my loops were so strong and strengthened in this area of social life and relationships and dating and all this stuff. So I realized, okay, that's way too much momentum there, and I know I have several other desires I need to cut. Using this diagnostic, I had a couple tools I was using to sort of reduce my obsession and overthinking on it, and sort of like obsessing and overfitting, right, in of that desire. Do a regularization process, which is what it's called in AI, and start to work on other areas. That completely shifted. So I guess what I'm saying is, to answer your question, this whole the whole rhythm of what the program will be is kind of based on what I did to myself, like how I was able to get to myself from a place of feeling like I was in crisis, that I had to like manifest like whack-a-mole. One area would get better, but the other area would I would be obsessed with. This other area was completely unchanged for years, so kind of like in this like crappy state where things just felt out of whack, to a way more coherent lifestyle. And I was telling all the Brave Mystic training folks from cohort 1 how like I was able to quit several substances while drinking and smoking and coffee actually all in one go, and it's like 4 months strong now, and this is an addiction of like I'm going to say 14, 15 years in the making. So that's all coming from this process, and that's the process I was trying to teach in cohort 1. 100% iterated for cohort 2, and even now as we're talking about it, I'm like, okay, there's ways we can land this even further, but yeah, that's the rhythm in a nutshell.
I love that. Yes. Yeah, I do want to emphasize, cohort 1, we had some awesome conversations and a great arc, and some people shared their experience this past Sunday in the testimonial open house that we had. But also cohort 2 is a complete iteration. We're continuing with the same structure, but all the classes are taught again live using what we learned from cohort 1. And so it just keeps getting better. It just keeps getting clearer. And we have a lot of graduates from cohort 1 coming back for cohort 2, which I'm excited about because of the momentum. These are people that are already, there's a couple on this call even that are already fluent in the ideas, and that just adds this strength and rhythm, to the container.
Yeah, that's systems
Shweta,
thinking.
yeah, go
That's
ahead.
systems thinking in action, Josiah, what you just said. That, they say that, hey, you are the sum of all the five of your best friends. And why do they say that? Why is that kind of like a handy thing to kind of make sense of when you meet someone? The group of friends is a good representation of who they are. And the reason for that is what you're talking about. It's like everyone that you interact with has a momentum and a system and loops that they're operating in. And depending on the environments we find ourselves in, we can absolutely get swept up. Our authorship can get swept up with, depending on the environments that we find ourselves in, because everyone is essentially having a feedback loop, is essentially conducting like a feedback loop. And so the feedback loop of momentum from cohort 1 was strong, and I couldn't have asked for more. And the fact that it's continuing in cohort 2 with several fantastic members joining us again, it's really exciting.
I love that the 5 people, they say the amount of money you make in a year will be the average of the 5 people and the amount they make. If you add up all those 5 people and you come up with the average, that's going to be very close to the amount of money that you make in a year. And that's just one example. I mean, that's also shows up in all other areas of life. I just think people's ears perk when they hear about, how the people that you hang out with directly affect your financial well-being. I do want to talk a little bit about the daily prompts. We spent a lot of time working out these prompts and going back and forth and coming up with a rhythm to them. Um, when people hear prompts, I think sometimes people don't really know what that means or what to expect. Can you share a little bit from your perspective about what the value is of the daily prompts?
Absolutely. So daily prompts that we write, and we were like you were saying, Josiah, iterating on them and put a lot of thought into them, because we know how important it is to cut through the noise of everyone's day. So the first thing in the morning, depending on where you live in the planet, but it was first thing in the morning, you had an opportunity to read something and engage with something that cut through the noise of your daily life, the ongoing loops of your daily life. And just cutting through that noise and seeing that signal come through with each prompt helped folks return their awareness to authorship and return their awareness from their reactions to life to deciding to re-author their life. And so these prompts were we had Josiah and I both creating them together. So each prompt would have an authorship and a simulation mastery component. And some of them were reflection prompts where you had to think of specific things in your day to day life and apply it to them. And then some of them were action based prompts where we wanted you to test it out in the field. So it was pretty cool. Like, we would have little daily prompts about things like, your diagnostics, loops that you're experiencing, engaging with people in your real life and seeing and testing things out. And so we don't think of these daily prompts as like journaling, because that's not the only thing that's going on. What's actually happening with the daily prompts is this interruption of the automatic loops that are going on. We had a Discord forum where people would, if they felt up to it, chose to share them, but it wasn't what I would call homework. It was daily prompts to interrupt your automatic patterns.
Very valuable. Interrupt the automatic patterns, because all of us, as we talk about so extensively in authorship, all of us are acting out scripts. And the question is, are these scripts that we have consciously chosen as the author of our lives? Or are these scripts that we're blindly operating in simply because we're unaware or dozing in our waking reality? So these prompts are designed to return the brave mystics, and make no mistake about it, this does require bravery. This is, we named it that on purpose, because it's easier to snooze and just let the scripts play. But to become aware of them, you have to be willing to take a hard, cold look at yourself in the mirror and say, who do I really want to be today? And the prompts help you do that. So the prompts interrupt those loops, they interrupt the scripts, and really ask some very provoking questions. And, just shared out, like if I was just to read one for you right now, out of context, without having the classes, without having any of the supporting material, you might raise your eyebrow and be like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. But with the context of the prompts the days before, plus what we're talking about in the classes, plus the sharings of all of the students who are responding to the prompts in the chats, in a public way, in a forum way, it becomes this momentum, and it becomes an energy all its own. And so when we were resetting for cohort 2, several members of cohort 1 reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to be a part of cohort 2 because I found that having this daily touch point to come back to every morning to remind me of my authorship, it's like a frequency." And so having a season where I'm just focused on this frequency every day, and it's keeping me awake in the dream of life, it's keeping me firmly anchored in the seat of authorship, it's keeping me connected to a community, a guild, if you will, of other reality authors who are doing the same thing. That's super valuable to me, and I want to keep that going. I moved and grew so much in cohort 1. I'm here for it. I want to do it again in cohort 2. So the daily prompts themselves are a huge part of the program. And I just want to mention that the prompts, there's 3 parts to the prompts. The first part is nervous system sovereignty. So every morning, the Discord prompt channel posts a nervous system sovereignty practice that guides you through step by step, just 2 or 3 minutes. It's all, literally all it takes. 2 or 3 minute practice of coming into coherence. That sets the tone of your entire day, and you're reminded to do it every day so that you don't miss a day. It's literally not like practicing with nervous system sovereignty for 99 days. Like, you can imagine how much your nervous system changes from that. Just that part. We're not even talking about the prompts yet. Just that part. Coming back every day and for 2 to 3 minutes, setting your energy at the beginning of the day in sovereignty. That alone is life-changing. And several mystics came back and shared that in the open house. They said nervous system sovereignty was the number one thing. Then comes the prompt. So once you're in coherence, then you read the day's prompt. And from that place of coherence, from that place of authorship, now this frequency is planted like a seed in your awareness. And then part 3 is a glyph. Okay, what is a glyph? A glyph is a visual symbol. It's a visual symbol that bypasses the language center of the brain completely and goes straight into consciousness. It's a consciousness language, consciousness first language. So the glyph, the way we design the glyph is we use mathematical, geometrical, and there's a couple other lenses here to take the energy behind the words of the prompt. Okay, so going straight to the energy level, like the psychic transmission embodied in the words. take that energy and create a symbol out of it that can be hand drawn by the brave mystic in the morning. Okay, so 3-part practice, right? So you start by getting into nervous system sovereignty, full coherence. Then you plant the frequency of the daily prompt like a seed in your mind by reading it. And then the third step is you draw the glyph in your journal. Now, the glyph is not complicated to draw. You can literally, draw it in a minute or two, depending on your perfectionism, which is also a feature and not a bug. A lot of mystics had to face their perfectionism, and they were able to grow through it because of what was prompted, through this drawing practice. But when you take the time to do this 3-step practice, you have now set your energy for your day in a way unlike you've ever done in your entire lifetime up until the day you started Brave Mystic training. Like, chances are you've never done anything like this. So what does that mean? That's a conscious pattern interrupt. What does that mean? That's now a neuroplastic state of being. What does that mean? That means now your neurological psychology is operating differently just because you are operating differently. You're doing something new. You're activating a different part of your brain. Okay. So, what does all these things stack up to? Massive and rapid transformation. It's a recipe, it's a strategy for massive, rapid transformation. And that's just from the daily prompts. That's before the deep dives in the weekly classes of Authorship and Simulation Mastery. Okay, so I share that because I want to, if we only talk about the prompts, we're missing the other 2 parts, right? But as a packaged whole, this is essentially a natural intelligence operating system upgrade.
Mm. Yes, thank you for reminding us all of the power that's packed into the daily exercises. And I think it's really key because we live in a time where there's a ton of freedom. I mean, especially if you're listening to this and you're in the West of, you're living in a time where there is a ton of freedom, but at the same time, everyone is trying to tell you who you are, and everyone is sort of waiting, unconsciously or unconsciously, to take your authoring power from you, and it can happen with the news, at work, at the doctor, any area of life that we're in. There's an opportunity that someone can, that the external reality might want to take away from you from authorship, and at this point, these exercises and any other 99-day program I've done with you, Josiah, have been what I needed to get back into a pattern, a rhythm of things. And I think that's why so many people from cohort 1 were excited to come back.
Yes. Speaking of the people from cohort 1, we did have some expectations about what we thought the arc was going to be of transformation for our first brave mystics. But after that open house and hearing it in their own words, I was a little surprised in a very positive way. So I'm curious about your experience of that, Shveta. What stood out to you about what people shared about their experience?
Yeah, I have to say, I don't want to do this now because I did almost cry in the in the live stream because there were a few people that were referring to remembering who they are and not abandoning themselves. So it's we can talk about the specific material outcomes, and those outcomes are always important to me. For me, material outcomes and results are extremely important. But this idea that for the first time in people's lives, they were able to return to themselves, discover who they are as the character, as the author, and as consciousness. And then this idea that they're not going to abandon themselves, running away from themselves every day. This opportunity that with the daily prompts and the work that we're doing gave them a chance to decide, you know what, this time I'm not going to run away. I'm actually going to stick with this. I'm going to show up. That just blew me away. And that, yes, that was part of the work that we did, and that's a result of the work we did. But it's also a result, 100% of the result of the people that wanted to show up and choose that, this state that I've been carrying around for so long, that's so embedded in me, I'm willing to try something new, try something different, to shift it. So it was quite beautiful.
Yes. Okay. So I think we got started a few minutes later, but we are coming up on the hour, and I am really looking forward to Dream Logic today. So let's begin to lead it out here. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share about Brave Mystic training, or how you feel maybe there's lasting implications of the work that we're doing here?
Yeah. I see this as, the work that we're doing at School of Imagination in general. What we're trying to do here is build a movement of people who live as authors and who are using the best in class ways of thinking to do it. Because it becomes so easy with the ongoing, the way the world works to continue to react and almost see ourselves a victim of circumstance. It's just so easy to forget, and that's what I talk about in the lucid dreaming radio hour, which is that the main skill is remembering. So, if you find yourself interested in this idea of, okay, I would like to live as an author of my reality. It's not just about manifesting specific things, it's about authoring my reality. I think that I'm keen to hear if anyone has any questions or thoughts about that. So that's really what I wanted to say, is that this is a movement of people. It's not just about this program, it's about everything that we do at the School of Imagination. And if there are any questions about that, I would love to hear from you. So if you're on Discord, you can send me like a little message, a friend request and a message, to reach out to us, or you can use the forum to ask any questions. That's really what I wanted to share.
Thank you for that, Shweta. My final thoughts here as we start to do the transition towards Dream Logic here. What inspires me about the Brave Mystic movement is I see where we are in history, in the story that is history, the story that civilization shares. I see where we are in history. There's a deep hunger for people to awake to authorship. It's, that we've as a civilization, we've moved through so many arcs of character development, and I feel like there's this broader rising through the spirals of consciousness, and we're reaching this place now where I think civilization as a whole is ready for awakened authors to stand up in their lives, to pick up the pen and to bravely write what comes next. I've talked about on the Visionary Leadership Hour, as well as many, many other places, I've talked about this idea of the paradigm that is changing, the old paradigm, the new paradigm that's taking its place, and how, whatever happened yesterday or whatever came before, we don't have to continue to perpetuate that. It's just a story, it's just a script. The minute that we pick up the pen and we become empowered authors of our experience, we can write something entirely new. And I think what excites me more than anything else is seeing the opportunity, having the opportunity to point people back to themselves, back to their original power in a way where they can emerge out of a training like this, a deep dive season of focus like this, ready to actively express their unique gifts, skills, talents, and abilities as authors. And then the ripples that compound, now it's Brave Mystics teaching their children. It's Brave Mystics, bringing nervous system sovereignty and state endurance into their workplaces, into their families, into their neighborhoods. And it's just, the way that ripples outwards, it just inspires me in a beautiful way. And it's a big part of where the energy comes from, that makes me, joyful about doing this. It's a lot of work hosting a cohort like this. It does hundreds of hours of work with Shweta getting ready for it, and then dozens and dozens of hours putting it all together. And what inspires me to get up in the morning and sit down on the computer and do whatever the next task is to prepare to host all of you is this idea of this is exactly what the planetary soul is asking for right now. And I'm deeply honored to be one of the many chosen voices to help walk forward this new era. Thank you all for joining this conversation. Visionary Leadership and BMT. If you have questions, you know where to find us. You can ask in the live chat. You can send us DMs here on Discord. And if Brave Mystic Training is calling to you, the registration window just got extended. So you got a little bit more time to align with it. If it's the right move for you, there's links all over the Discord. And if you have questions about it, you can ask us as well. And we will be back with you in just a moment.